to now pivot on and look ahead to the meat of the second test. This is huge. Test 2 takes place in Cape Town Stadium in Cape Town, as Test 1 did. 31st of July on Saturday. That's 8 p.m. I believe kickoff time in South Africa, and 7 p.m.
7 over here,
in England. So prime enough time, a reasonably prime time kickoff for the all important second test. Ben O'Keefe, as we said, is the referee. Lots of pressure, obviously, mounting on him.
Barry and Raynell on the sideline.
Raynell
and Marius Jonker in the booth.
Yes, pressure on the SAFA as well. So that referee team very much under the spotlight, but we'll see how they go. It's obviously, the Lions are on the hill now. The first test in the bank. I think there was twice in history they haven't won the series after winning the first test.
I know 2001.
2001 was one. I think I can't quite remember when the other one was, but it was a ways back.
30 or something.
And only once, when they lost the first test, have they won the series as well. So the first test tends to be quite decisive. But this test, needless to say, could level us up and tip the favour back in terms of arguably the fresher squad after the Lions having played such a long season. Very interesting game. I expect the Boks to be ferocious and furious and hope to make the key adjustments and come out with that same blistering energy that we always want them to bring. The Lions, they're on the hill. They have the opportunity to make history. I think letting it slip, as they did in 2001 with the 1-0 lead, things can then snowball on you. So they'll
want to see it home.
They'll very much want to see it home and do it this week, just not to bring it to that third test with the Boks and all that sort of
and
emotional
a whole other
energy.
week of all kinds of other stuff in the media and all kinds of whatever else goes on.
It's a huge game in that regard, and I think we can expect a game that is likely to rival the second test in 2009 for physicality. I think you're expecting
some of the ferocity in those hits was crazy.
And some of those Safas are going to be well jaded by what happened to them last week.
And just stung. And be hoping to kind of put in some hits on to get some of that frustration out, kind of take it out on a few red jerseys over there. That's what we're anticipating some massive collisions, which we were treated to in Test 1 as well, but the ante is up. If you beat the Springboks on their home patch, they're definitely going to come out with spitting a bit of fire in the second test.
And I expect the Lions to be spitting stuff as well. It's going to be really, really fun, this one. We do have the squads, as we have done. They've been obliging enough to release them early in the week on most occasions.
That's right.
So the Springboks have a few changes. I'll just run through the squads now. We'll talk about what we think in a moment, but they've gone with Kitsoff, Mbanambi and Malherbe in the front row. Couple of changes there. They've gone with Etzebeth and Mostert staying true in the second row. They've gone with Khaleesi, Peter Steff, and Visa comes in for the unfortunate Smith, who had a rough day of it starting last week at 8. Faf and Andre Pollard get to go again. Hopefully Pollard's injury not too bad after last week, although he did end the game looking ginger. He gets the start this week. Then Dale Indy and Am maintain their role in the centres, two pretty flawless players at 12 and 13. Mapimpi, Colby and LaRue make up the rest of the 15. On the bench has Malcolm Marks, Trevor and Yakanye switching to loose head cover. And then Vincent Koch coming in to cover tight head. Oxenche drops out very harshly on him. He had a fine first 40 last week, and now he seems to be out of the reckoning.
He left the pitch and they were 12-3 up and doing grand. Now he's out of the test.
Hard to be the man to blame, but yet it transpires that way. And Lou Diager covering lock. Van Staden and Quagga Smith make up a 6-2 split.
The bomb squad reassembled in new form for the Boks.
Indeed, and Herschel Yankees and Damian Willemse are the two back subs.
Yes, at the expense of Elton Yankees, which is probably right and proper. And the Lions, meanwhile, have also named their team, and they've gone with a couple of changes, but the spine of the team remains pretty true. We have Mako Vunipola coming in at loose head, with Luke Cowan-Dickey and Tyke Furlong retaining their jerseys. That makes up the front row. Itoje and Alan Wynne-Jones renewing their partnership in the locks, with Courtney Laws retaining the jersey at number 6 after a great showing. Tom Curry and Jack Conan also retained. So it's only one change in the pack at number 1 for the Lions. And that's
an enforced one. Wynne-Jones didn't play last week.
Wynne-Jones was out before kickoff last week, so Sutherland actually came in and did an okay job, but actually Mako was more impressive off the bench, so here he is getting the start on the basis of that. Conor Murray is in at 9 for Ali Price, who makes way and drops to the bench. Interesting call that. He partners Dan Bigger. Then you have Robbie Henshaw partnering with Chris Harris, who comes in for Daly. Daly drops out to the bench as well. And then the back three remains unchanged. We have Duhan van der Merwe, Anthony Watson and Stuart Hogg at fullback. And the replacements are Ken Owens, Rory Sutherland, Kyle Sinclair in the front row, Tyburn and Toby Falatau in to cover the loose forwards / kind of second rows. And then you have Ali Price, Owen Farrell and Elliot Daly completing the 5-3 split, more traditional 5-3 split of the Lions.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. On the face of it, I think I like the Bok adjustments a little better. I think they've gone back to the 6-2 split, which is dead right. I think getting Elton Yankees out of there and keeping Willemse in as not just one of the good utility back who can cover all corners, but actually just a really informed player who I think is the guy you'd most trust to step into any of the jerseys
even
if
it has
goes
to be
down.
Pollard, who if Pollard can't do the full 80, which maybe is a factor, was seemingly a factor in the decision to put Elton on the bench, but I don't think it was vindicated. I think we've learned a few too many times from that experiment. It just doesn't work for the Boks.
No, I think Elton is no disrespect to him, but I think barring a miraculous transformation in form, I don't think he'll play for the Springboks again. It's a bold statement, but I don't think I think he might have disappointed one too many times when he came off the bench and dropped a key ball and wasn't able to add things on the toughest stage. So no, but Willemse by contrast is in fine form, making that play last week. I think him on the bench as back cover makes good sense. He'll come on and impact the game. The 6-2 split makes sense. The change at 8, Jasper Wiese, I was sceptical enough when I saw Quagga Smith in last week, and I think that scepticism justified.
Yeah, because he was brilliant in the South African A game, and he's more of a like for like guy with Dwayne Van Meulen, who they're obviously missing, and missing is a big crucial word. Like his telepathy with Khaleesi on defense and stuff, all of that stuff was great about them. That is they are without. Wiese did a great job of slotting in and looking big and barnstorming and physical, but also dealing with those high balls that Quagga was struggling with. He did that in the South Africa A game, so I think he's a sensible decision. And then renewing that 6-2 split, which is a big job for Van Staden, who now comes into the match day squad as well to make up that 6-2 split. They'll be looking for more impact off the bench than they got in the first test. For sure, and it remains to be seen whether they can bring that, but I like the adjustment off the face of it. Interesting to see Oxenche gone, as we noted, but Trevor and Kanye, like obviously it's a big ask on a week's notice to change scrummaging from tight to loose, although that is the easier switch to make. When I last saw him play loosehead, he was extremely destructive. Maybe they've seen some stuff in training. On the face of it, I think a starting front row with Kitsoff and Malherbe and Mbanambi with Kanye and Vincent Koch to come on is pretty meaty. And Malcolm Marks of course as well, is probably better on paper than what they had last week. So I definitely like that adjustment, and then I like keeping the back line the same in the main. So those Bok adjustments I like. The Lions ones, there's always going to be more questions because there's more options. So that definitely is a factor. Personally, I think I've been saying for the whole tour, now I've been wrong on many things in the whole tour. I said they should have thrown the ball around and they didn't. They stuck to their guns and played a very good box kicking game and set piece game and won the game that way. Fair play to them. That's kind of that. I didn't see that coming, so I might be full of crap. They might just go and do it again. But I do wonder how much a test like that takes out of a team, and I would have loved to have seen some of the weapons that they have deployed. And that's the way I'd put it. It's not a question of dropping people, it's a question of they have unused weapons, they have fresh weapons, like Jamie George. It's not because Cowan Dickey or Ken Owens did anything wrong that throwing Jamie George in there might have been a good idea, or Adam Beard, or Johnny Hill. Like Simmons, even these guys.
They've a lot of guys who can mix it at the top level. I might have liked to see a bit more rotation just to keep things fresh. But on the flip side, now they have a lot of fresh guys if they need them coming into next week, who should be sharp enough to go and jump in after having had a few run-outs themselves. They should be sharp enough to be thrown in next week if need be. So that balance is okay, but the changes are definitely interesting. You know, Murray in for Ali Price. Price played so well, cleared the ruck really well, which is something Murray has struggled with, and his box kicking was arguably more on the money than anything Murray's been delivering in recent time. I don't necessarily love that adjustment. I do like Mako for Sutherland. Mako's earned it after a really shaky start to the tour.
I like Harris for Daly as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would have even seen Bundy in as well. What I don't like is Daly on the bench. In fact, I think if Daly in there and Liam Williams out of there seems crazy to me. I thought Daly was very poor in that test.
Yeah, he struggled.
He struggled in every area. Like, granted, starting out a game by getting absolutely smashed by Latanyo Am is not ideal for anyone. Like, the third minute you get absolutely cracked, and then a few minutes later you're asked to kick a long kick, which is your specialty, and then you leave it short because you just got cracked. And then it's like, oh yeah, wait, I'm a little bit broken. And then for the rest of the game you just couldn't get a thing off, which is my fear, because it was the same in the World Cup final. And it's like Elliot Daly can look very, very good when he's running in lovely tries from 13 against the Stormers, but I just fear for him out there against those Boks. And I think, as you said, with deploying weapons, like there's no room for the two Welsh wingers in the 23, but Daly's still in there on the bench. I don't know.
No room for any part of that Welsh back three that was so good at the Six Nations, but such is life. They do have a decent team on paper. They are one up in the series, and
they could still win it. Could
absolutely still win it. Just looking at the game from the point of view of the two teams, I think starting with the Boks. Obviously, we've discussed the game till the cows come home already on the tour, but I think in the main you have to look at some key adjustments. I don't think that the Springboks are going to change who they are.
No.
They're going to play a mainly kicking, mainly defensive, mainly pressure set piece game. They're going to try and acquire penalties and ultimately acquire some chaotic tries in moments. They'll rely on their
turnover tries. Lovely neat on the transition is what they want to be. Which
on the transition.
You saw from Peter Steff, you saw from Dialinde, you saw their instincts are there.
Yeah, neat on the high ball as well. If the ball comes bouncing into the hands of Colby or someone like that, they'll look to get those kinds of tries along with defensive tries.
Yeah. Indeed.
If the Springboks are to score 3 tries, the likelihood is, one is a maul, one is a crazy ungathered kick that ends up bouncing and they get it that way, and then the other is a defensive pressure try,
either turnover or some kind of
intercept or something,
smash and pick it up.
Those are their main kinds of tries. That's how they're going to look to get their scores. But they do have some key adjustments to make off the basis of that first test. I think the first one is the defensive maul.
Yeah.
The defensive maul, the Lions used that maul to kill the game, and it worked. And that is a point of pride for the Springboks. And there's a few, there's always a trade-off when you're looking at how to defend a maul. There's very specific tactics, and the use of one can at times prevent the use of another.
Yeah, you see that all the time. If you, the decision, do you jump when you're 5 out defending, or do you brace yourself at the bottom for the maul that you know is going to come?
Indeed, and do you try to sack? Do you try to insta-sack before the transition of the ball as soon as the ball receiver's down? Or do you come through as a unit and try and drive them to a stop?
Do you get your long-limbed men to try and front crawl through it, which is a tougher tactic these days now that they're zeroing in on the changing of the bind?
It is. They got one off with Etzebeth, but the changing of the bind is definitely a factor. How do you do it without giving away penalties? And at times, are the Boks overextending? And they are coming through too hard on the inside and just allowing the Lions to pivot to the open side and then get a clean maul going. I think there's a science to it as well, where sometimes you can try and overextend on the open side, force them towards the touchline, and then allow someone like Etzebeth to get in as they're isolated on the narrow side. I think they did that really effectually in one particular defensive instance. But for the most part, what was happening was they weren't able to get a playoff against that Lions maul.
The coughing up penalties really or tries from it.
And they were at sea, and it's a point of pride for them. The maul is a huge area. It's an area that the South Africans understand. Mm-hmm. For me, it's the first port of call is that they cannot allow that Lions offensive maul to kill them the way it did in Test 1.
Well, it's a tougher ask, but it's one that all Tier 1 sides worth their salt, and particularly the Springboks are very good at. It's a notable difference in Tier 2 meets Tier 1 is that even some competent Tier 2 sides can get a good offensive maul going, but the defensive maul is just such a tough science, and they are always outmatched when they meet Tier 1 sides in that area, and that's why you see 4 tries from hookers and stuff. It's just,
I would shout out, I know we're previewing the Boks, but I'd shout out Robin McBride at this point as the Lions forwards coach. They're very well organised and in tune with each other in a way that the backline and offense isn't. They're
more in sync. The rhythm to the takedown and the transition from the maul, and some of the work from, we cited Tyg Furlong, but also from Alan Wynne Jones and from these guys at the spearhead of the maul. Very tough, limmy guys, powerful guys to deal with, and it's on the Boks to try and make that adjustment, because they can't afford to allow the Lions to have that much of an inroad into their territory with that kind of set piece. It's going to be a huge emphasis.
The second key adjustment, this is a refereeing one, but it has to do with the discipline on the offside line. There are some penalties they're giving away which aren't explicable by tactic or by training, like you think of Quagga Smith just getting tackled and getting back up again. Disastrous penalty to concede, can't happen again.
Coach killing error.
Coach killing error is what you call them, I guess. But then there are other ones which are more structural, and it's a trade-off that the Boks have had for as long as Razzie's been in charge of them and longer.
And probably longer, they want to apply pressure, they want to jump early, they want to be up in your face as quick as possible. But you see every now and then, like there was a case in the first half last week where I think it was an overthrown line, or a line out thrown over to Henshaw, which was met brilliantly by Peter Steff and Khaleesi, who smashed him. And that was like immediately good defensive hit. The set piece is stymied, but off the next phase, I think Dialinde just jumps early, and there's a penalty for offside, and it's 3 points, and it shouldn't have been.
No, that's the killer. Yeah, exactly. And it's the trade off is like when things are threatening, it's more understandable. Like if the Lions are putting together 3 or 4 silky quick phases, if they're getting to the edge really quickly, then you might see the Springboks try and jump a little earlier, or at least time their run so that they're sprinting off the line as soon as they can legally be allowed to.
Yeah.
But then there are other times when the threat really isn't there, and the Bok defence is so solid and so strong, and their quality of their tackle is so good, that the trade-off of jumping that little bit early in terms of the advantage versus the potential disadvantage giving away the penalty is way off.
Put in a few hits already. How slick do you reckon the Lions are going to be? And on evidence, not that slick they against their defence.
I think they could take in general multi-phase play, they could take a step off on their defence and maintain its integrity just without giving up those crippling penalties and those crippling entrances, because the Lions have been very efficient once they've gotten into the red zone, into the scoring zone, and it's because the Boks are giving them entrances. They need to limit those entrances, make it as difficult as possible for the Lions to enter into their territory, and that comes from just being a little tighter on the offside line in particular. That's the one that they keep getting called on, that they need to.
It's as you say, it's a byproduct of that urgency to get up in the face and
which
create
can't
that,
go away entirely.
No, it's still a key fulcrum. It's still their key avenue to scores, as we said. Like their offense looks a little shaky in the multi-phase, but their defensive pressure can yield scores, and that is a big part of their picture. But the trade-off needs to be there. They need to recognise that they can't afford to keep bleeding these penalties, because not only are we going to allow them to get in and we're going to be defending, I know we like defending, but defending our line ongoing, which just piles up the penalties, because as you say, refs, once you get into the red zone, refs are looking at everything the defence is doing, jumping early, getting a hand in a ruck or something, and not tackle all of this, and not really looking at the blatant ceiling that is going on from all the latchers who keep piling around. Like the offence just doesn't get refed.
That is to change from August 1st. So
apparently but that's nothing to do with bias one way or another. It's just the offence getting refed. It's how the game's refed at the moment, and the Lions have looked very efficient both at the maul and then at the kind of Exeter ball that ensues from the maul once it is defended. So all of that is just something best not invited upon yourself needlessly from the middle third, where a lot of these games have been played. The South Africa game, a lot of tussling in the middle third has gone down, and you can't be the side to blink first and to blink so needlessly on certain occasions, which they have been doing.
100%. So the discipline in that area is the second really key adjustment. The third I would cite is the aerial contest,
which Ian Naber did cite himself in the week. He said that was like a decisive factor in the game, which is a good point, more so than even when you about the ref. I'm glad that he said that, because it's like, well, that's true. It's unequivocally true, and it is something that you can improve.
And to be fair to Nienaber as well, he has struck a much more modest tone. Well, I wouldn't say Rozzy was immodest, but he's struck a more introspective tone.
He is actually the coach, so he has to be a little bit more tactful. Razzy's kind of enjoying his water boy / kind of director.
Who knows what I am?
Just commenter, Maverick. Podcaster now, I guess. YouTuber. Yeah, he's
Don't
enjoying
forget
his
to like and subscribe.
That would have been funny. But Ian Naber citing that was encouraging if you were a Bok fan. It's just like, you were looking at the same game I was. We were vertically challenged for one thing, but also some of those Quagga plays were so massively problematic at the start of the second half, and really flipped the game on its head from one that we were winning to one that we were clinging on and then ultimately you bring in a guy like Visa, who's going to have to fill that role and has done a better job of it more recently. So that's a sensible change.
That's a good change, and they would hope that solves it. They'll also have to have someone on Duhan watch on that chase, because Duhan was a nightmare in the air. Like that there's a way to do that subtly and unsubtly as well. You can see them compounding it by trying to make that adjustment. Someone gets in Duhan's way, they're a step off the pace, and then nudge him, and then all of a sudden it's a penalty and an entrance. That's what you can't bring, but what you can bring is just like a little subtle, those not blocking, but blocking kind of tracking runs where you're just
just
running straight back,
lane.
but putting your body basically between Doohan and the ball so that he has to run around you to get there, giving the receiver a little bit more time.
As well as pressuring the box kick itself and all of that stuff.
Just not allowing the Lions to exit so freely and recover the ball. It's going to be a huge point of emphasis on them this week, I'm sure, and making those adjustments I think will be absolutely key. Then there's a couple of other adjustments that I'd cite that the Boks absolutely have to make. The first is the offense, I think, in general. I think we made this point when we were reviewing the last game, but I just think, a couple of years ago they were a joyous offensive side at times to watch.
With a few bad habits that cost them games.
Yeah, they could get to the extremities quite nicely. That hangover from the Heineke Meyer era, who's Heineke Meyer is remembered now as the coach that lost to Japan. He was so much more than that as coaches for the Springboks. He tried to fully evolve their play. And in his era...
Brought Billy LaRue in.
Absolutely. And in their era, they scored some fabulous tries, moved the ball to the extremities. They got that coast-to-coaster against the All Blacks that you'd never see a Springbok team score these days. But they need to rediscover just a bit of that. It starts with Faf. Faf needs to be looking to attack
needs to be a little
more.
A little sharper than he was. He looked sharper in the South Africa A game than he did in that game, and that was just in terms of a few degrees off, which has a knock-on effect on the offense.
Yeah.
But you're right, of course. Their multi-phase isn't quite as threatening, and that last sequence in that first test is the big concern. Like you got your guy off the bench. He got up. He won the aerial contest. For once in the game, you got the ball back. You have a minute and a half to go to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, and you just look so impotent in those moments. And it's not just fatigue, it's shape and options that you're hitting that are just wrong and allowing the Lions to come into it. Whereas in the one moment that they did score a great attacking try, it was off a midfield scrum at the start of the second half that they moved it right through both Pollard and I think Khaleesi, and then moved it left, and LaRue put up a bomb which Mapimpi claimed, and they went again, and it was just a really good sequence
stretched
of attacking
both sides
rugby.
of the field and then ultimately broke the line and got the score, and they do have the quality out there to do that. They need a bit more system and structure in place. I also think just the fact that Faf is kicking everything right now, it has allowed the Lions have adjusted to it. Stuart Hogg was covering the backfield. We haven't mentioned Stuart Hogg yet, but he was covering the backfield supremely well. Basically had everything covered, and the Lions were able to predict what was going to happen. They knew the kicks were going to come. They knew they were going to be able to set up offensive lineouts, and then they knew themselves that they could work deep kicks. They could edge this kicking contest, and they ended up doing so. The Boks need to bring another element to their play where they give the Lions more to think about.
It's not dissimilar to what we saw from England post Autumn Nations Cup. We were tearing our hair out at England during the Autumn Nations Cup because they were kicking everything, kicking literally everything, no subtlety, no kind of shaping to do anything else other than just kick and defend, which is broadly what the Springboks are doing and what they did to them, which was kind of what we thought was inspiring their decision to do so. But then what happened was they got found out in the first game of the Six Nations by a team that were game to attack, that managed to open them up and then force them. They suddenly their backs were to the wall. Now you have to attack. And like that team that had been schooling the All Blacks through their power game and through their slick passing suddenly looked like rudderless and didn't have the shape, that they just weren't prepared to attack a game like that. They didn't know how to do it because the muscle memory doesn't last that long. And the Boks, we know, have those abilities in them, and we know that their wingers can be lethal in space. But when they were when they were behind and chasing the game ultimately, and they were a little bit leggy and they just didn't quite have the zip in it, their shape was poor and their tempo was not ideal, and the options they were hitting or folding into were just not sharp.
It was the options that were wrong for me as well. Like Faf has that wonderful wide passing game, but you do need to see the loose forwards picking sharp lines, and you saw some of that from Sia Khaleesi. Like Khaleesi would cut a lovely line between two players, break it and get to deck and present clean ball. The next phase we got to be going. We got to go around the corner. We got to really probe those
extremities. Too often the next phase was a slow hit up.
Yeah, or just going back the other way with a forward carry, like something like that. That's where you need Faf to be sharp and to dial in those offensive instincts that were the hallmark of his game as he was coming through, and can very much still be. I think that the Boks need to find that element. I think they're going to need it if they want to win another World Cup as well. Like we forget that they're world champions and their Alliance tour and everything feels so in the now. You know, there's a World Cup coming up in 2 years. They have an absolute target on their backs, and the All Blacks are waiting in the tall grass for them
later this year. And they still have the Lions there hoping to claim a test series against them.
Exactly right, but they're very, very physical, and at the moment they're going to need... They are a very physical team, the Boks, but at the moment they're going to need to dominate from minute 1 to minute 80 to get a win over the All Blacks,
Yeah.
whereas the All Blacks will just need 2 or 3 moments to go their way to win that game.
Yeah.
The Boks need to bring something more on offense. We saw against Georgia, Peter Steff in the wide channels. We talked about it in our preview. It didn't materialise. Neither offense got much off.
Of them getting wide and finding Khaleesi and the like, and even Peter Steff in the wide channels linking
Off that one play,
but
they need to see more of that. They need to get the ball to the extremities a little more often in the sort of offensive third, but also just in the middle third once or twice.
Yeah.
They are going to kick the bulk of the ball, but the best way to win the kicking battle is going to be to add layers of subtlety to it.
If you have more options, it's tougher to cover the kick. Like, if there are more options to worry about. The thing that, like, Hogg had a field day and he had 2 pacey wingers on either side, and tall pacey wingers who covered every blade of grass with him. Like, at one point Anthony Watson had a defensive kind of catch and turnaround that was lovely and a beautiful kind of coverage. But it's the fact that even though that was a good box kick that found a bit of grass, they still kind of knew to expect a box kick, even though it was from an offensive scenario that you'd be very surprised to see a lot of other teams kick from. There was no element of surprise. The kick was coming in. It was very surprising if anything else was happening, and it was only a reactive thing that led to anything else happening, rather than proactively probing a little bit and then putting the kick in, which will just make it a better kick already.
Exactly. We're trying to work your guys onto the ball from multi-phase, your explosive ball carrying and lethal wingers would be no bad thing for the Springbok team either. So working on the offense is huge, and then hopefully the last 30, which I think is your key adjustment. Can the bomb squad that's there, can they deploy their bench a little more sensibly?
Yes.
And add some
blow
impact.
Their load too early, to borrow a quite crass phrase, but yeah, like in terms of the front rowers coming on very early last week, just on the stroke of half time, left them. It was an unusual 5-3 split for them, not their usual 6-2, and considering the amount of forward oriented work that they forced their team to go through, it just makes sense that they have more forwards to bring in. And then you couple that with the fact that they've kind of flagged both in the last test and in the South Africa A game and pre-tour, it was the talk of coming in undercooked. Obviously they've been behind closed doors, COVID has forced it, but they've played like a million Curry Cups and no international matches in the meantime, so they're feeling a little undercooked, and you're seeing that in those last quarters. So yeah, it makes sense that it's gone to 6-2 again, which it just feels more natural for this team and the way they want to play. And now it's on Ian Naber to recognise the moments to deploy those guys and to make a better job of it this time, because they didn't get any the desired impact. They definitely didn't get, but the only even bit of positive impact I could cite from the bench last week was Willemse. The rest of them really didn't perform that well or didn't add to him. They for some of them were forced. Like Herschel Yankees had to come in because Faf was slowing down. And Willemse had to come in ultimately because Villy LaRue got the hit, which meant then that when Pollard was slowing down, then Elton has to come in, and it's like he juggles the ball in his 22, and that ultimately leads to the game icing penalty down the line. So it's all of these are negative impacts as opposed to positive ones. You want to see that flipped on its head if you're a Springbok this week.
Absolutely. And in the main, I think you just want to see them execute their plan. You want to see them defend relentlessly. You want to see them be hungry. Conor Murray's into this Lions team. You want to I'm sorry, but you want to target him. He's not as good at clearing the ruck. If you're Faf de Klerk, you want to be the quicker scrummy. A few times in Test 1 he was kind of trying to time Ali Price and run up and be onside to try and dive at him, but Ali Price was just clearing it from the deck, and it didn't pay dividends at all. He was firmly dialed in.
I love to see that. Because that's exactly the kind of hungry Faf play that can catch kind of lazy, slow, laboured Murray off guard very easily.
And that's what they need to be bringing. The Lions are going to kick a lot of ball if they can deal with those, tighten up their discipline, not give up anything on defence, and add a little bit to their offence. They'll feel they have enough. And then the other area of intrigue is the scrum. You know, Makavunapola doing a decent job against Malherbe, but are they going to make the adjustments
now as well? They haven't seen
at their best. Kitsoff and Malherbe are relentless scrummaging beasts, and they
Kitsoff Furlong though.
That's
his box office as it comes.
It's all box office. I mean, it's definitely a massive battle, and the Boks will feel they're more than good to edge it as well. And I think another psychological one would be, you know, they have their own offensive maul. They had so few lineouts. The Lions didn't kick anything out of play, and they have to be aware of that. Which is one of the reasons why they're going to have to work the ball into a bit more space to clinch the kicking game, is because the Lions have basically been allowing for the game to progress with a lot of ball and play time,
Yeah.
not giving up the box penalties.
They actually wanted to. It's part of their game.
Oh yeah,
plan.
totally.
Yeah, yeah.
But if the Boks can apply a bit more pressure, they might force the Lions to kick it out, but via putting a good kick, probing kick deep, force the Lions to exit where they're either going to kick it infield from deep in their own half, which is not ideal.
With still some retreating men to get it,
or find the touch as they may have to do, and that's what the Boks want, is to set up their own lineouts and their own driving maul. And I think they'll definitely look at that as an area to say, like, oh, we have a driving maul too. This could be a psychological coin flip where we could get on top of you now, and all of a sudden you have to deal with a tough maul. So I think all of those kind of tight forward battles are where the Boks are going to look to adjust and get on top. But I don't see any sort of magical change to the shape of the games that we've had.
Not reinventing the wheel, but obviously recognising what shortcomings they had last week and how to adjust to it. So it is the main talk is adjustments, and adjustments will have to be made by the Lions as well. In terms of their game plan. As much as they won that first test, they did, but it was only by a score, and they'll admit as well that they probably did get the run of the green with the ref, and they were the beneficiaries of it. They certainly played the game better from what the ref was wanting to look at, but it's a new ref now this week. It all starts again from zero, from the clock and the scoreboard, and they have to arrive to the pitch of the battle. Like as you were saying, you would have liked to maybe have seen a little bit of rotation in the back row or something. Some of these attritional positions that they're going up against these Springboks in, haven't quite seen that. Now that they're there, we'll see if they're up to the pitch to kind of see this home, because it's going to be tough. It's going to be tougher. They have to anticipate that the Boks are going to be backlash here. There's
no question it's going to be tougher. There's also no question that what worked last week, they might have to put the foot on the accelerator for. We talked about in the build up to this tour about Finn Russell and the potential of a joyous Lions backline with Rhys Sammet and Russell and the boys, who I would have picked, who might well have got curbed by but just trying to beat them with offense and razzle dazzle. We will get that game, but we'll have to wait until the All Blacks play the Springboks to see it, because the Lions aren't going to give it. I don't think. They went back to they kicked the leather off the ball, and it worked for them. They won.
It was the first two plays last week where they managed to seal the line out ball very neatly on both instances. One by Alan Wynne, one by Courtney Laws. First one was a bigger bomb straight up, and that nearly worked, although they got partially pinned for a penalty. And then the second one, they tried a little skip pass out the back and got cracked immediately. And then it was more of that.
It's not happening. They're going to kick most of the ball. They're going to look to get on top. And listen, that offensive maul is such a huge weapon for them. Kicks to keep the ball in play, just probing the extremities enough to get Hogg on the ball and Bigger on the ball and find the right parts to kick.
Were, in their few ball in play moments that were dangerous, it was the Bigger Hogg connection out wide that was working very well. Either Bigger at first receiver finding Hogg out in the extremities, or Hogg at first receiver giving Bigger a little bit more space to link with those guys. That's they're going to try and time those moments, but they will be looking to find some seams. But it's not a razzle dazzle helter skelter, let's attack you from everywhere. It's kind of a pick your moments and try and be accurate, but it predominantly dominate the kicking.
And it's a tall and athletic winging combination. I mean, there's been much headlines made of the fact that it's such a tall Lions backline. It's because they've introduced Murray and Harris who are both taller than their respective men, but that doesn't actually change the aerial game that much. It's the two wingers, Watson and Doohan in particular. They need to be launching the ball up to those wings and backing those guys to make athletic plays on the ball.
As opposed to predominantly, based on last week's evidence, predominantly the left hand side.
Absolutely.
Because actually Mapimpi was pretty good in the air, more so. He won most of his things. He only lost one that I can remember.
And he actually won one up against Watson on the other side as well. So that there is some truth to that. But I think that the Lions, where the box kicking is more about just chase for defense's purposes, it is a kick to give up the ball. The Lions need to kick to recover and transition. They need those exit kicks to be high. Infield, they don't want to give the Boks lineouts, and that's fair enough. I definitely get it. Keep the pace of the game up. But if they are going to be contestables, Murray's box kicking needs to be on the money, and they need to have the chase be on the money, and then get those athletic plays, turn over the ball, and then move it. Either through like a hog spiral where you're pinning them back into their own territory and setting up from there, or by getting to the wide channels against a disjointed defence. That really is the Lions picture. And then you hold the ball for a few phases at frenetic tempo, you back the Boks to give up a penalty, then you can go down the line and work your maul. That's your picture. I mean, that maul is so great if they can keep that going.
Dominant. It's been so good. I love the transition. You were right to cite Robin McBride as a really a guy doing a great job right now. The Lions look so organised and so together as a cohesive unit. It's like it's the toughest thing to do when you're assembling a Lions squad. Like on paper you're looking at it's like, oh, you're just assembling a superstar team from 4 different countries. How's that fair? It's like, well, the reason it's fair is that like the other team are certainly more cohesive as a unit. Like they know how they want to play. They know their identity. They have a national identity, sure. Whereas the Lions are kind of all over the place, fluctuating as far as like how should we play? Who should be the players? I don't know. Like it's a very tough task, and to have a pack that's so primed and so ready to go to war against the most domineering pack in world rugby, in the Springbok pack, and to be getting plays like that offensive maul off, that speaks to the forwards coach credit enormously.
Absolutely, and that is the main of the picture. Win the kicking game, get on top of them, and then just like those tight plays on defense, attacking the ball. Those turnover plays were worth their weight in gold, and it was just, it's not as much tactical as it is playmaking from the likes of Itoje. Curry was trying it as well. He was living on the edge and he was giving up penalties.
A couple of penalties. They were both in the first half, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt because he kind of did.
Was it not?
Oh yeah, that's right. He was a little looser as well. But that's certainly more so than Laws or Cohen actually.
But they all had liberty to play make, and they all had liberty to attack the ball on defense. And while Itoje was of course the most successful with his freakish ability, like they all fancy mixing it in terms of the physical stakes, especially on defense, as much as the Boks do. Getting out of the line, getting one man low and another man attacking the pill really did frustrate the Boks at times.
Yes, it did.
And that is like a key area where they need to focus and double down on. I mean, they put together a real tactical masterclass and a performative masterclass last week. They do need to do it again. I also think that they will need, in my mind anyway, I don't think the Boks will be as on the wrong side of the ref for one reason or another this week. I somehow suspect that all of those offside penalties that were coming their way won't. And I think that they will need to score. They might get that mull try again, but they'll need to score another type of try. And I think that they do need to have that dialed in. We still haven't seen them, punch that hole outside Peter Steff. I mean, I had Henshaw running that short line. He ran one short line off the set piece and he got smashed because he didn't quite get to that outside. I was
talking about the outside, the one at the very end of the first half where it was Hogg at first receiver to Bigger outside to Henshaw, who was suddenly outside. It was Khaleesi in this instance, but outside that man that we were citing, and suddenly there was the hole.
That was sort of outside the 13 channel, but absolutely that was there, and that was the one clean break in the game. We do need to see more of that screenplay, and for getting Dan Bigger into second receiver pivot is no bad thing, because he can execute under pressure. More than any of them, and the Boks will send the guy in the 13 channel into his face, and if he can keep executing those tip-on plays to perfection, that's a great source of it. But I also just want to see them dial in getting outside Peter Steff and between the 13 channel into that seam where Pollard kind of is charging at that area, sitting them down and being quick off the second phase. I want to see them get to the edge and attack this Bok defense, and I think they're going to need to score like one of those tries, or at least get
better try.
I was going to say a better try. It's probably not fair because the maul is a beautiful
maul,
but they're going to need to score another type of try, I think, to win this game. That's my prediction, my solid prediction for the Lions.
It might need more than 3 points in the first half as well, because that's now 2 times in the first half that they've just been blown away. And as much as like it's nice to finish stronger, and definitely a part of their game plan, as you say, keep the ball in play as much as you can by either kicking it in field or just kind of trying to keep the tempo high, and also just the ball alive for as long as you can. Don't make it a stop-start game that the Boks want. Make it a kind of a protracted one, because you fancy your fitness levels, and I think they do. I honestly think now, based on evidence of those 2 games that we've had, really, they've been the team that have finished by far the stronger and feel fit and fine, and they did altitude training in advance of this. Turns out they're not even playing at altitude, so all of that
still
positive
stands to them somehow.
Well, it does. When it's like when you see the Kenyans rock up to the Olympics and can run for days, and you're like, oh yeah, okay. So it's like, they're feeling very well prepared, so it's important that they finish strong. But I don't necessarily think that the Boks are going to remain that kind of slow towards the end, and I don't think that 3 points is an adequate return from the first half, despite the fact that they won the game, and it's happened twice now in both games.
Indeed, they're going to have to tighten up the cheap pens themselves in that first half, because as good as the Boks were, some of those points were very, very cheap, like the late hit on Faf, just a maddeningly cheap 3 to give up. That really can't be on the agenda. Defending gamely, but also winning the territory battle and keeping the score down in that period is key. And then in the second half, when you can introduce your game-breaking Tyg Burns and the like, that's when you look to spring. But I definitely think from a tactical point of view, early doors, yes, there's a lot of kicking. There's also moving the ball to kick in the right ways. I'd love to see Hogg's boot get dialed in.
Yeah, the only spiral he dialed in was the very last kick of the game out into the nearly into the top stand and kaboomed it. But it's like, come on.
Work him into a little bit more space if you can, and get his boot in as well as the exiting box kick. But if they can get on top with the variety of kicks that they have, pin the box back and control the territory game for the first half, then strike in that third quarter. And actually, to be honest, that 10 minutes before half time, the Boks have a big 30 minutes in them, but we've seen this a few times. They aren't as attuned to that period just before half time. Another thing they'll have to work on before they play the All Blacks.
The All Blacks have been putting poor Fiji to bed in those minutes more recently.
And to the Lions' credit, they have racked up most of their points in that pre-half time period.
They have even in the warm-up games when they've been a little floundersome for the first 30, they'll sometimes dial in those last 10 before half time, which are the championship minutes.
It's important. Absolutely. Either side of half time. Keep it tight and strike either side of half time. But striking does involve more than just an offensive maul and a good kicking game, and as good as they have been, the Boks will be a little better, and if the Lions don't expand their game a little more and add a little more offense to their brilliant forward performance, I think they will lose the test if they don't add a little bit more to their game. I think they will need to find tries in those key periods, unless of course the Boks give them loads of entrances and they can get 2 or 3 maul tries, and then you're happy days.
The Boks want to open us up with like a 3-minute red card 3 minutes in or something.
There's always these dynamics at play. It's a fascinating battle, and the Lions will have the advantage, but will they have it going into next week? Do you see them wrapping up the series?
I don't know. It's a tough one, isn't it? I was torn last week. I was torn between the head and the heart, thinking will the Lions edge it or will the Boks edge it? I think I voted with my heart rather than my head and said the Lions, but I didn't quite believe it at that time. This time I'm in two minds again, because it's a one score games. It's very, very tight. It's a flip of a coin in my head. But there's part of me that thinks that the Boks flagging towards the end is a real concern. That's my main concern, more so than even the area, all the minutiae of what could, or the tactics here and there. But if they're going to flag again, they're going to lose again, and that's not and that's a disappointing way for the Test series to go, because then it'll vindicate all that pre-tour chat about undercookedness and perhaps the wrong time for it to happen and all of that. And I don't like to see a Test series come down to that, because I think what I would want is things to go more down to the wire, and if one team can't make it to the wire, then it's not going to go down to the wire.
Sure.
So that's my. If I start to see them flag, then I'd be very worried. But I'm encouraged by the adjustments, as you said, the 6-2 split back. I think they're recognising all of these problems. So my head is kind of leaning towards the slightly sloppy Lions, who still, like, even in their wins, even in their victory, like as we were saying, in that first half, the few times they tried to move the ball, they got absolutely smashed. Including their one penalty of the first half came from a defense, like they got smashed off the line out and smashed again, and then it was a silly Springbok error to jump early. They had no need to, and if they didn't, then it probably would have been 0 at half time. So yeah, I'm thinking that if the Springboks do tidy up and have the staying power, that they will take the second test with probably by a similar amount, only a score, maybe 2 scores if they're that bullish. But I think it'll probably be a 1-score game, probably a 3-point game in favour of the Boks.
It's hard to tell. It depends, obviously, if the Boks find them. If the refs don't take kindly to Razzie's antics and get really tight on the offside line, it could be a very long day for the Boks, and they need to keep their heads and not compound mistakes. But I do think that they made some good adjustments. I agree with you on that. I personally would have liked... Now, listen, I'm conscious of the fact that I'm second guessing Gatland on a million things, and he ends up laughing in the end, as he's always done, laughing all the way to the trophy in most cases. So there is that element to it. But personally, I don't see why you wouldn't have freshened up the pack a little bit as well as they performed last week. I think it's a huge point of strength for the Lions, and I think it makes the Lions certainly series favourites from here on out. They obviously have the 1-0 lead, so of course they're favourites for the series, but the fact that they have the likes of an Adam Beard and a Johnny Hill and a Jamie George and a Falatau to bring into this test pack, and even Rhys Sammet and Josh Adams hungrily waiting to get their opportunity, is just a massive point of strength. And if it comes down to the third test, the capacity to introduce 2 or 3 of those guys and take the game to another level, I think would be that could be a difference maker. But I think this test will depend on just what state that starting pack are in. How much did it take out of Alan Wynne-Jones to go as long as he did in that game? Even Courtney Lawes off at 72 minutes, such a big unit, putting in such a big show. Yeah. Can he replicate that same explosivity that he had last week, or is he going to be a little off the pace?
Yeah. Is he going to be hit by a hungry Visa who's straight in and fresh? Like, there's more freshness in the Boks side. And then also the 6-2 split for the Boks, I didn't disagree with at all, whereas looking at the bench for the Lions, as much as you're citing all these weapons they're holding back, like when 60 minutes comes round, I like that Ollie Price can come on and up the tempo. Tyg Byrne as well.
I think the bench is good.
No, I was more citing outside of that. What are Farrell and Elliot Daly going to add off the bench? I don't know. And looking at what Herschel Yankees and Elton Yankees were contributing the last week, that's kind of what I fear for the Lions, is like if they're behind and chucking those guys in, I don't know if that's going to change anything for the Lions from a Lions point of view. Whereas
maybe not.
I'm looking at what the Springboks have picked, and I think they're probably a little bit more accurate this time.
Yeah, and I think I would probably lean Boks, just because I would say that the if they can channel the hunger and aggression, and I'd say the pressure that's on them now, all of that.
The last time they've lost back to back at home?
Yeah, indeed, and in such a big stage as world champions as well. Like, their pressure on them is enormous to deliver, and if they can allow themselves to respond to that in buoyant physical fashion, I think they could shock the Lions in that early stages. And then it becomes a question of, do they make those early stages count on the scoreboard? And if they do, I think I would go with Boks. But I suppose that's a long old explanation. I'd say probably the Boks, but I think the Lions to win the deciding test if they make the right adjustments. But it's very tough to say. It depends on so many factors that are fluid, which is why we don't really think the predictions aren't the most important thing.
Predictions are just for colour, but we're going to still give them anyway. I'm leaning Boks, but cheering Lions.
And happy to be wrong.
Happy to be proven wrong again, as we often are on this podcast. But that's going to be this Saturday, Test 2 of the Lions Tour. Huge game between two mighty teams now, and I'm just I was impressed with the first test, so now I'm just buzzing for the second. So excited to see this roll on.
Absolutely.
Thank you for tuning in to the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed what you hear, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below as well. We enjoy hearing your opinions too. Thank you.